a visionary business leader, patron of the arts, and pillar of philanthropy. These are words that best describe Dr. George S.K.T. His unparalleled leadership, generous spirit, compassionate heart, and outstanding contribution to nation building will always be remembered. Born in 1932 to Norberto and Victoria T. Tanak, Dr. T was destined not only to become a successful businessman, but also as a humanitarian figure someday. Reared in the Spartan conservative environment of hard-working parents, he found himself running the Wellington Flour Mills, where young George would gain experience. It was during the course of transacting with banks to secure a loan for the family enterprise that he became interested to go into banking. At the age of 29, he founded the Metropolitan Bank and Trust Company. Since then, the bank has grown to become a premier universal bank and among one of the country's financial conglomerates. The young man's seemingly simple desire to make money so I can give money had become a lifelong commitment. Today, the values left behind by Dr. T remain true to every Metro banker's heart. Passion for excellence, integrity, teamwork, customer service, heart for community. "You're in good hands" remains one of his lasting legacies. More than a founder, he is legendary. Dr. George S.K.T., a visionary business leader, champion of excellence and integrity. Dr. T's humanitarian legacy shall continue to live on and ripple, a lasting impact across the many lives he had touched. In 1979, Dr. T established the Metro Bank Foundation as a venue to share the benefits of the bank's success with the community. Since day one, Dr. T has been guided by the belief that wealth, once made, is meant to be shared. He saw many opportunities to make things better for the Filipinos. Dr. T relentlessly dedicated his efforts to empowering modern-day heroes through the Metro Bank Foundation Outstanding Filipinos. He highly regarded members of the academe, military, and police for their quiet yet exceptional acts of service to the nation and the citizenry. His passion for the arts compelled him to conceive the Metro Bank Art and Design Excellence. Since 1984, MADE has served as a platform to discover local artistic talents and has facilitated a generation of creative ideas for social development. Dr. T has always recognized accessible, quality education as a driving force in social development. Dreams of underprivileged yet academically outstanding students are realized through the Metro Bank scholarship programs. Improvement of math proficiency among the Filipino youth is fostered through the Metro Bank Math Challenge. Generations of students who become well-rounded professionals with a strong sense of work ethics are nurtured through the Manila T. Tanak colleges. Through legacy projects of GT Foundation Incorporated, his contributions to the promotion of excellence in education was further bolstered. Dr. T generously extended grant assistance to various social development partners to assist underserved individuals and communities in the fields of health, education, arts, and livelihood. Each year, he didn't fail to personally hand out bags of blessings to underprivileged families. In 1979, Dr. T acquired the majority of stocks of Manila Doctors Hospital, not only to become a leading health and wellness center, but also an institution that provides social services and subsidies to indigents. Dr. T, meanwhile, led the conglomerate to actively respond to and support emergency, relief, and rehabilitation efforts to reach out to survivors of both man-made and natural calamities through the Metrobank Group Helping Hands. He would always be remembered as a true visionary who dedicated his life to create and propagate a culture of excellence among key sectors and in serving the needs of communities. Dr. George S.K.T., an exemplary pillar of philanthropy. For Dr. T, art contributes to people's higher awareness of what is important and essential in life. To him, art serves to inspire and enlighten people, enabling them to contribute to nation building. He saw art as a beautiful expression of people's creativity, spirit, and culture. He valued art that showcased local traditions, art depicting people in crowded places. To him, these scenes serve as reminders of persevering individuals who have entrusted their hard-earned money in a bank. MADE was conceived and pursued by Metrobank Group founder and chairman Dr. George S.K.T. in 1984. At that time, the nation was in the throes of economic crisis and socio-political unrest. The Filipino people were in search for meaning and hope beyond the uncertainties of the time. While many took their struggles to the streets, Dr. T discovered much promise and potential in Philippine visual arts as an alternate platform for people to be heard. Metrobank has always taken pride that art has a special place in its culture. Dr. T would always be remembered as someone who paid homage to Filipino artists. Dr. George S.K.T., a champion of Filipino creativity and artistry. Dr. George S.K.T., a visionary business leader, a champion of excellence and integrity, an icon of philanthropy.
Ang favorite teacher ko si Teacher Jean kasi matapang siya.
Mrs. Testa, she's a math teacher because we're both good at math.
My favorite teacher is Miss Grace because she's our advisor and she's nice to us and she helps us learn.
All of us have an experience of having had one special teacher that have made a difference in our lives. People who saw the possibilities in me and encouraged this and helped me grow to what I am today.
Teachers are the fiber of society, no? Without teachers, you won't have any other profession after.
What inspires me to do these things? Kasi dati rin akong bata, lahat tayo bata. At ang isang bata, ang gusto lang niya ay magsaya. Wala pa sa kanya yung konsepto na parang, kailangan ko talaga mag-aral. Ang nag-inspirasyon sa akin, dahil ako nung kabataan ko, medyo malungkot din ako noon. This time gusto ko yung teacher, pag naandyan sa unahan, pagtingin niya pa lang may impact na siya, papasok ako kasi andyan yung teacher.
Nung una ko makakita ng blind, nung ako'y nasa college pa, nag-practice teaching ako sa PNU, nagkaroon ako ng passion paano magturo ng blind. So, nung nagkaroon ng opportunity nangangailangan sila ng mga scholars teaching the blind, nag-volunteer ako, I took the exam, I was interviewed. Unfortunately, nakuha akong scholar at simula noon, 38 years na akong special education teacher.
I started in special ed and then went on to reading education because I wanted to understand why some children or some people couldn't learn how to read. A lot of children in the Philippines weren't learning to read because they weren't reading in the language that they knew. This was preventing the development of reading comprehension. And you ask any grade school teacher, reading comprehension is the problem.
I came from a small town, in fact, because I started teaching in a missionary school in our hometown, where 90% of the students come from poor families. And then because I wanted to improve myself also, because I believe that you cannot give what you do not have, I opted to go back to teach high school students in Iloilo. I never realized the impact of what I had been doing in that school will create ripples not only in the country but even at the international level.
In 1984, Mr. T decided to launch the search for outstanding teachers. The whole idea was to recognize a key pillar in our society, who are the teachers. If we recognize the teachers, if we incentivize the teachers, if we motivate them to do what they should be doing best in the classroom and in the community, then we have attracted them to do something to improve the whole system.
Ako very thankful na binigyan ng pagkakataon na parang ako, Rizal is a representation ng maliit na eskwelahan na sabi ko nga hindi lang pala yung mga universidad ang may kapasidad. Sa pagkakapanalo na yon, parang binigyan niya ng bagong mukha na kahit ikaw ay maliit o malaki, hindi sinusukat. Basta ginampanan mo yung trabaho mo, ginawa mo yung tungkulin mo bilang isang guro, panalo ka.
Marami pa po ako mga parangal na tinanggap. Pagbalik ko po sa paaralan, nakita niyo po na pagkalaki-laking banner na kinakongratulate ako. Ang awarding din po ng school share, ibinigay din po sa school. Sa Senado, nagpunta kami ilang interview po sa mga radyo. Higit po sa lahat, ako'y nakarating po ng Amerika. Natingnan ko po doon ang mga programa ng special education sa 9 states dahil po yan sa pagkakapanalo ko sa Metrobank.
I won in 1997. In 1998, I received the TOIM Award for secondary education. In 2002, I received my first international award. In 2004, I think I received 3 international awards. It's all because of the Metrobank search that has opened doors.
The one thing that this search gave me is a huge dose of humility. You meet teachers working in mountains, in fishing communities, who have no resources. And yet they manage to do what they're supposed to do and go beyond that.
Metrobank Foundation's focus on education and teachers, outstanding teachers, is one will be recognized as one of the most important private initiatives.
And recognizing teachers does that. It says teachers are important, not just big businessmen or entrepreneurs. They're important too. But the teacher in the classroom is very important and they have such a major contribution to the country.
Para yung Nobel Peace Prize or Pulitzer ng pagtuturo. Yan yun eh. Sa Pilipinas, yan yun.
Being world-class is passion and commitment to our profession. Being world-class is giving our best. It's simply giving our best. And for us teachers, being world-class starts inside the classroom. But most of all, being world-class starts within ourselves.
I'd like to invite all of the teachers to be interested, look at our criteria. You are there and we want to discover you, but you have to help us. We need to come forward and look at our very simplified rules of application and get yourself nominated. To the principals, to the regional directors, to the presidents of colleges, together with Metrobank Foundation, let's bring them up and give them the honor that they truly deserve.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Microbiology professor Dr. S.P. Cabrera has expanded the boundaries of scientific knowledge in the country, enrich competencies of budding and professional microbiologists, and uplift overall human conditions in places needing crucial aid.
Lumalaki kami, talagang yung mama ko, in-inculcate kami, dapat excellence. Kahit na ano ka, kahit na teacher ka, kahit na ikaw ay anak ko, o ikaw ay maging nanay sa ibang araw, kailangan, o kaya kahit kapitbahay lang ha, kailangan kung ano yung magagawa mong pinakamaganda. Sasabihin mo, ay hindi ba nakakapagod yun? Pero hindi parang dahil sa maliit ka pa, ganyan na, parang natural lang na yun ang gagawin mo. Kaya, at maswerte rin ako na yung mga taong kahalubilo ko, for example, yung mga school admin, yung mga teachers, yung mga estudyante, pati na yung aking asawa, si Alex, at yung mga anak ko, mga kamag-anak ko, lahat sila, kahit na in-laws ko, lahat sila napaka-supportive. Maganda ang experience ko sa microbiology. Talagang makikita mo ang relief ng pasyente. Pag malaman mo kung ano yung mikrobyo niya, kung anong tamang gamot, makikita mo talaga yung effect. Kaya siguro yun ang nag-engganyo sa akin na deal na lang sa microbiology. Para sa akin, pag sinabi nating outstanding Filipino, magaling ka, hindi lang doon sa iyong confine. Kaya hindi lang ikaw nag-excel sa eskwelahan na pinagsisilbihan mo. Kasi Filipino hindi naman outstanding teacher lang Kaya ibig sabihin, as a Filipino, you have your responsibilities to your country. Kaya ang parati kong sinasabi sa estudyante na napakalaki ng role ng isang teacher sa nation building. Dahil sa produkto mo estudyante na magiging teacher din. May mga ganyang cycle Kaya sabi ko, as a teacher, wala kang ibang choice kundi you have to do your best. Alam mo, ang gusto ko talaga, mas malaki ang involvement ko sa pag-upgrade ng science. In the sense that, ang feeling ko, ang dapat i-upgrade natin, yung science teachers. Really, the true measure is with the kind of students that you produce, kind of graduates that you produce. Not only in terms of competence in their field, but also with how they serve their community. Malaking bagay yun.
with the theme Equity, Solidarity, Engagement, Purposive Education in Times of Change. We are all here for the third International Network of Outstanding Teachers and Educators Noted Conference. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to our participants coming from the different parts of the globe. Good morning, Dom.
Good morning, Mercy. Wherever you are, warm greetings from the Philippines to you all. Mabuhay. Welcome to this third international conference. This conference is a confluence of teachers in the basic education, teacher educators, researchers, administrators, practitioners, and advocates from different education sectors of our society who will participate meaningfully through exchanging ideas and exploring new research paths.
The theme, Equity, Solidarity, and Engagement, Purposive Education in Times of Change, revolves around education in such contexts and constraints brought by an environment characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, or we call it VUCA, which positions our conference participants to reflect on the desirability, impact, and magnitude, as well as challenges that have been drastically transformed by the pandemic-spurred changes to education.
Indeed, very timely and relevant. This third international conference aims to provide a venue for engagement and collaboration in navigating the issues in education in these very challenging times.
In addition, this conference aims to explore possible and alternative solutions to these complex educational challenges.
And finally, this builds our communities of practice where educators share common grounding for sustaining quality education.
I guess we are now ready, Sir Dom, to begin. May I request everyone to pay respect to our flag as we sing the Philippine National Anthem, which will be followed by the invocation.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
If my people will humble themselves and pray, if they seek my face and humble themselves and turn from their wicked ways, I will hear from heaven and forgive their sin and heal a broken land. Lord, we vow one knee, we humble ourselves and pray. Lord, we seek your face and humble ourselves and turn from our wicked ways. Father, in your mercy, forgive our sins. Father, in your mercy, and heal their land. Lord, heal our land, Father, heal our land. Hear our cry and turn our nations back to you. Lord, heal our land, hear us, O Lord, and heal our land. Forgive our sin and heal our broken land. Lord, heal our land, hear us, O Lord, and heal our land. Forgive our sin and heal our broken land. Lord, heal our land, hear us, O Lord, and heal our land. Forgive our sin and heal our broken land. Hear our cry and hear our broken land.
There you go. We paid homage to our country and to our creator. This time, let us all take a look at what Noted, the network of outstanding teachers and educators, has done, and let us be transported to the engagements that the officers and members have had. Ladies and gentlemen, Noted in action. Let's watch this Noted AVP.
Give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks to the Holy. Give thanks because His faith, Jesus Christ, His Son. Give thanks with a grateful, give thanks to the Holy, give thanks because He's given Jesus Christ, His Son. And now let the weak say, I am strong. Let the poor say, I am rich because of what the Lord has done for us. And now let the weak say, I am strong. Let the poor say, I am rich because of what the Lord has done for us. Give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks to the Lord. Give thanks because He's given Jesus Christ, His Son. Give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks to the Holy. Give thanks because He's given Jesus Christ, His Son. And now let the weak say, I am strong. Let the poor say, I am rich because of what the Lord has done for us. And now let the weak say, I am strong. Let the poor say, I am rich because of what the Lord has done for us. Give thanks. Give thanks. Give
Indeed, the network of outstanding teachers and educators, or NOTED, has gone a long way. And in particular, in the preparation efforts that the officers and members have poured in, it is really a testament that equity, solidarity, and engagement have steered the organization to reach its common goal. Its goal really of being us for others. So we are seeing more engagements partner to be undertaken by the network of outstanding teachers and educators despite the and in spite of this pandemic. That is for certain.
Yeah, that's very true, Doc Mercy. And to formally welcome all of us to this event, may I invite all of you to listen to this introduction. Mercy?
It is my pleasure to introduce to you one of the strongholds of NOTED. She is an SOT, or Search for Outstanding Teacher 1999 awardee, and has led NOTED since 2019. At present, she is a faculty at the Philippine Normal University. Ladies and gentlemen, the president of NOTED, Dr. Josephine M. Calamlang.
To our respected Secretary of the Department of Education, Leonor Magtolis Briones, to our distinguished speakers, Mr. Aniceto Chito Sobrepeña, President Bert Jasmine Tuga, Director Nelson Salansang, and Dr. Chris Forlin, to our research centers, participants, guests, and friends, and to all Metrobank noted outstanding teachers and educators. A pleasant and God-filled morning to one and all. Despite the many challenges the world is facing each and every day, and the many changes and disruptions that have been causing uncertainties, I, in behalf of Noted, stand before you and bring you this conference. Yes, the first virtual international conference in the 24 years of existence of our organization. True to the conference theme, the ideals of equity, solidarity, and engagement are driving force to propel like-minded individuals and participants to be more purposive in whatever we do, most especially during this time of change. I thank you all for believing in the purpose of this conference. I invite you to listen to the wisdom of our speakers, to witness the vitality and the conscientiousness of our researchers as they present their work. I invite you to engage in authentic discussions by clicking the raise hand button, or posting your questions in the chat box. And of course, to network with other participants in more ways than one after this two-day conference. Before I close, I'd like to express my huge gratitude to all Canoted for your untiring dedication, commitment, and passion to realize this dream. But of course, I'd like to leave the rest of my expression of gratitude to our Vice President, Dr. Ernilea Cao, at the conference closing. Ladies and gentlemen, I now officially open and welcome you to the third Noted International Conference. Mabuhay!
Thank you so much, Dr. Kalamlam. This third international conference is participated by those coming from basic education to tertiary level. It is just fitting to hear a message from the Secretary of Education herself. At this point, to give her message, let us now listen to the words of our highly esteemed Secretary of Education. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Leonor M. Briones.
Leonor Magtolis Briones, a passionate educator, an adventurous writer, a gender advocate, a faithful servant of God, a trusted public servant, and a loving mother. She had her education at Silliman University in 1958, obtaining a bachelor's degree in business administration, majoring in accounting, and obtained magna cum laude at the early age of 17. She obtained her master's degree in public administration from the University of the Philippines and postgraduate diploma in development administration from Leeds University in England. She was also conferred Doctor of Public Administration honoris causa by the Central Philippine University in 2014. Liling has also been an achiever, as she was awarded with distinction from Leeds University, England, and obtained certificates in policy in public enterprise from Harvard Institute for International Development, Harvard University, and innovations in governance from the John F. Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University, Massachusetts. Later on, she ventured into public service as secretary to the Commission on Audit and served as the National Treasurer of the Philippines. She also accepted the UP presidency nomination in 2010 that was initiated by the National College of Public Administration and Governance students and was supported by more than 1,000 people coming from the faculty and alumni through signature campaigns. She also pursued her life's advocacies, including fighting for social justice. As an established leader, she headed the Freedom from Debt Coalition. Briones was also a gender advocate who raised the level of discourse to address the plight of women. As a passionate advocate for social justice, she addressed the United Nations General Assembly in September 2005. In front of an international delegation, she bravely uttered to them, "Fulfill your promises, as the poor cannot wait for too long." She also became a party list nominee to the Congress under the banner of Kaakbay Party in 2012, which advocated for social reforms. She also served as a prominent petitioner of several non-government organizations and individuals which questioned the constitutionality of the disbursement acceleration program of the previous administration. Secretary Liling has spent most of her life as an educator. Whenever or wherever she delivered a public lecture, she taught like a teacher in a classroom. She became a researcher and professor at the University of the Philippines for over 50 years and was later conferred as Professor Emeritus in 2013 for her outstanding achievement inside and outside the university. A natural lover of music, she is also a member of the Manila Concert Choir and is currently serving as its president. With her invaluable success and journey as a leader and educator, she embraced public service and accepted the challenge to become the Secretary of the Department of Education of the Duterte administration. One of her greatest contributions to DepEd is the installation of reforms in the education system through the launch of Sulong Edukalidad, the rallying call for national effort to innovate Philippine education. Recently, she launched 2 books that depicted her life as an accomplished public servant and author. The first one was her biography, Faith, Duty, and Country, written by her friend and confidant for nearly 55 years, Dr. Proserpina Chit Domingo Tapales, a former dean of NCPAG, on her journey from being a poor girl from Gihulngan, Negros Oriental, up to being a public servant and advocate of education for all. Her second book, Boiled Green Bananas, is a compilation of her columns published in the Business Mirror from 2006 to 2016. To quote her supporters, "There is no shadow of doubt on Briones' probity and integrity." And until today, throughout her 80 years of experience, she shows how a true servant leader should be: ethical, dignified, and responsible.
Good day, everyone. In the name of the Department of Education and on my own behalf, I would like to congratulate the Metrobank Foundation Incorporated, and most especially the Network of Outstanding Teachers and Educators, or MBF Noted Incorporated, for organizing this seminar or webinar series for teachers, especially those who strive for excellence those who strive for innovation, and those who respond to the call for creativity in these very difficult times. I congratulate you on your choice of a theme, which is equity, equity for all. And of course, you know, this is a goal which is greatly desired in the light of the economic and social and political situation of the country, where there is a vast gulf between and among various economic classes, as well as social and political classes. And education brings about equity because for us, each learner is precious. Each learner is a distinct individual, and each learner has the right to be taught just like all other learners. Your next theme of solidarity is very important at present. And there is no time to be quarreling and debating and attacking each other, sometimes viciously, sometimes politely, on how we are going to face the challenges which we have to deal with in this time of pandemic and still be able to deliver the learning which is expected of us to share with our learners. Solidarity is important. Solidarity between and among private schools and public schools. Solidarity between and among civil society organizations. Solidarity between and among business organizations like Metrobank Foundation, who all have a keen interest in the furtherance of learning in our country. More than ever, the call for solidarity is loud and clear, perhaps louder than all the vicious arguments, perhaps louder than all the attacks against each other and all the disagreements. Beyond this, we have to remain and hold each other's hands in solidarity because the lives and the future of our children are at stake. Engagement is very important. We have to continue engaging with each other. And this is where organizations like your MBFI Noted Incorporated plays a very important role. I clearly remember the time when Chito Sobrepeña and I were chatting during the reception after one of the Metrobank Foundation Awards for teachers and for policemen. We were at the same table and it suddenly occurred to me that it would be a great and wonderful idea if awardees will organize themselves and continue discussing, debating, and thinking of ways with which we can further improve education in this country. Chito and I were thinking aloud at that time that it would be great if you don't lose touch with us, especially awardees who have already retired, and you will continue being involved in education, sharing your experiences. You are a very special group of, organization, as an organization. You're a very special group. You are awardees. You are filled with distinction. You have innovated. You have sacrificed. You have traveled with your students on very long journeys of exploration and excitement. And of course, you were recognized and awarded for it. And so we look to you to continue sharing your experience, to continue inspiring other teachers to innovate, to create, to work together and hold the hands of our learners as they move forward on the journey towards the manifold adventures of life. Purposive education in times of change is crucial at this time. Education has to be purposive. We have to be clear about our goals. We have to be clear about our directions, especially in these times when changes are happening, not only by the day or by the year or by the week, but sometimes even by the second. Changes are happening every day, and if there is one thing we have to teach our learners, it is to recognize that things change, that knowledge changes, that people change physically as well as mentally and socially, and we have to prepare our learners for change. I believe, for example, that we cannot go back to those golden days before COVID. If and when, finally, COVID will be under our control, it will still be with us for some time, or perhaps for all time, but we will have controlled it already. And our lives will have changed. And this is why we talk about new normal. We talk about future studies. You can contribute to our search for visions, for goals, for new paths, and help and seek your guidance based on your own experience and your own creativity, which you exercised and for which you were awarded. So I wish you the best of fortunes and of good luck. I wish you God's blessings. There are many events, many changes which are happening right now in the department, as all of you know, those who are still in DepEd and those who have recently retired from DepEd. We have gone into blended learning. We continue the process of education. I would like to correct the notion that our schools were closed for how many years. We opened classes last October 5, and this year we opened classes September 13. This year we are having more learners, by more than 2 million increase in learners this year compared to last year. This indicates the unending thirst for education of our learners, as well as their parents and their communities. We have started with blended learning. This is when COVID-19 emerged and erupted. And now we are going into limited and pilot classes in face-to-face learning. Again, you will be very, very useful because, as all of you know, face-to-face will not be the same as the face-to-face that you and I enjoyed when we were in our early years of schooling. Face-to-face cannot be associated at this time with children, learners climbing over rooftops, stealing guavas from the trees or mangoes from the mango trees behind the school, or playing truant, or running after each other, playing contact sports. It will not be like that, because face-to-face will be closely regulated in the light of the risks associated with COVID-19. Also, each face-to-face experience of each country, and you will be very helpful here, is going to be different from the face-to-face experience or methodologies of other countries, because each country formulates its own approach to face-to-face based on its own context, based on its own assessment of the risks that are involved. And so our own face-to-face will be unlike the face-to-face of any other country, in the sense that the face-to-face exercises of other countries will be unlike ours, unlike any other countries as well. We are now closely monitoring what is happening and what the other countries are doing. And no one country is quite like any other country. No one country can be imitated because we have to work ourselves through this very challenge. And this is where you are going to be helpful. So, as you proceed with your webinar, as you proceed with your conference, as you debate and discuss and link up with each other, as you hold each other's hand in solidarity, as you search for equity for all learners of our classes, of all economic, political, and social classes, as I said earlier, as you do all these things, don't forget that you are awardees. Don't forget that you are excellent. Don't forget that you are special. And we look to you to make special contributions to the challenges that we are facing at this time. Thank you very much. Congratulations. We all love you. All the teachers admire you for what you have done and look up to you to continue helping us, to continue innovating, to continue creating, even as others will now qualify for the awards. Thank you very much and good day.
Okay, on behalf of Noted, thank you very much, Madam Secretary Briones. And moving on, our keynote speaker will be introduced to us by SOT awardee in 2003. Friends, help me welcome Dr. Samuel R. Sullivan. Sir?
Hey, good morning. Thank you very much. We praise the Lord because of this wonderful opportunity He has given us as we conduct our Noted's conference. And it's one great pleasure to introduce our speaker, one great icon in the Metrobank Foundation Incorporated. He graduated from Ateneo de Manila University, a cum laude in the AB Political Science degree. He joined NEDA and simultaneously studied at UP Diliman and finished a certificate in development economics as NEDA scholar. A master's degree holder in development economics as a USAID scholar at the Williams College in Massachusetts. Then at age 36, he served as the youngest cabinet secretary in 1990 under the administration of President Cory. With a score in government service, a distinguished CESO with an indelible mark of leadership, he embraced in 2006 the Metrobank Foundation Incorporated. In this corporate social responsibility arm, he is now the president. He has expertly steered the MBFI to new and greater heights of institutional achievements in the public affairs and human development sector. MBFI is one of the country's most dynamic philanthropic organizations, a multi-awarded corporate foundation. It is dedicated to serve the nation. MBFI's wide array of CSR programs is making waves here and abroad in education, visual arts, healthcare, the judiciary, police, and military. It provides grants to various socio-civic and charitable institutions. What a great heart of leadership he has. One great Filipino for the nation. This Superman shares leadership in various Metrobank institutions and companies. As Executive Vice President of Metrobank, Vice Chairman of Manila Doctors Hospital, Chairman of Manila Titanic Colleges, Trustee of Toyota Motor Philippines School of Technology, and Executive Director of GTF Foundation. Friends, he is a man with inspiring smile, a man so generous, gracious, and divine. He is a diamond at the Metrobank Foundation. He has inspired many and touched the lives of many teachers across the nation. He is an advocate of teacher appreciation and recognition in the country, from September 5 and culminated on October 5 being the World Teachers' Day. For all teacher heroes, the pre-service, the in-service, the retired, and the departed, his purpose-driven commitment to education is a trademark for many years he has upheld. This leadership hero has an admirable spirituality. He is a committed member of Ang Ligaya ng Panginoon community, with partners in mission like Couples for Christ, Christ Youth in Action, and the Brotherhood of Christian Businessmen and Professionals. He is a pastoral leader. With his wife, Ma'am Ana Isabel, they are currently involved in conducting marriage enrichment workshops. And they are blessed with three angels, Gabriel, Raphael, and Michaela. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome one great gem of the nation and the inspiration of noteds as for others, MBFI President Aniceto Mangahas Sobrepeña.
Commission on Higher Education Chair Prospero de Vera, Education Secretary Liling Briones, noted President Joji Kalamlam, our teachers and educators, good morning and welcome to the third International Noted Conference. I would like to congratulate our Metrobank Outstanding Teacher Awardees for mounting this conference. Thank you for providing a platform for education stakeholders to exchange ideas and share best practices as we transition toward a new normal. More than a year has passed since COVID-19 dramatically altered our way of life. Among others, it disrupted the Philippine educational system, forcing us to stop face-to-face classes and to pivot to blended learning to ensure continuity of learning for the country's 24 million students. Naturally, this transition was not without challenges. Many students and teachers in remote and rural areas still do not have access to a computer or the internet for online learning, while parents had to assume the role of surrogate teachers. But while this disruption highlighted new and existing disparities, it also opened doors to many opportunities. More than a year into the pandemic, we can now reflect on the lessons learned from our past challenges and explore how we can reshape our vision of Philippine education in a post-pandemic world. In short, ladies and gentlemen, we must build back stronger. Already, the national government has taken small steps toward that goal. For one, our Department of Education is currently in the midst of resuming face-to-face classes in low-risk areas for the first time in 2 school years. We fully expect these pilot schools to serve as models in getting our learners back to school safely and hope to see more reopen as vaccines Education Futures Unit that seeks to craft policies based on research, big data, and best practices from across the world. Hopefully, through the work that they would be doing, we can start to see a more resilient, sustainable education system that harnesses new technology for better pedagogic strategies. Thankfully, our year-long experiment with modular learning showed us that this is very much possible. Despite the challenges and initial apprehensions about going virtual, millions of students were still able to continue their studies through mixed media strategies. What is surprising is that evidence suggests that e-learning can actually be just as effective, if not more so, than traditional classroom setups. The Research Institute of America found that online learning actually increases retention rates by 25 to 60% compared to the 8 to 10% in face-to-face learning. Students also learn 5 times more material online because they can learn at their own pace and revisit the material whenever they need to. Of course, the Philippines still has a long way to go in closing the digital divide and ensuring access to technology and infrastructure. However, these statistics paint an image of what it would be like to integrate these technologies into the country's education sector moving forward. We aim for an engaged studentry that can think more critically and freely for themselves. This is especially more relevant now in the age of social media and immense technological innovation. Students now have so much resources at their disposal through the internet that it rendered obsolete our traditional notion of an educator as the sole knowledge holder. As you, our dear teachers and educators, are encouraged to rethink your role and purpose in this new landscape. This is not to say, however, that your roles have become irrelevant. Technology can only support and not replace you. However, it has amplified the need for better educators who can steer the youth through this increasingly complex world and who can guide them to make better choices and become nation builders. Just as the pandemic revolutionized our education sector, it also radically changed our understanding of what you, our teachers and educators, must do. Gone are the days when you were the sole authoritative sources of stock knowledge. You are now seen as facilitators of learning who encourage open-ended discovery and individual thinking skills. Ultimately, your role as educators is to prepare our learners intellectually and morally for life and for the world of work. You need to broaden their horizons and raise their aspirations so that they can make the best start in life. COVID-19, thankfully, did not change that rule. In fact, it only accelerated the need to introduce lifelong learning strategies that are more appropriate for the 21st century classroom. That being said, we need a more human and student-centered approach that takes into consideration their individual skills and needs to make our learners more competitive in a post-pandemic global labor market. We must make this shift much more urgently and decisively if we are to prepare our students for this new normal. Even before COVID-19, new technologies were already radically changing jobs and the skills required to thrive in workplaces. A World Economic Forum report suggests that 65% of children now in primary school will have jobs in the future that do not yet exist and for which the education system will fail to prepare them. According to the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the way work is organized is also changing too, as remote working slowly but surely becomes the norm. More and more countries, including our own, the Philippines, are also institutionalizing policies that increase ethnic and gender and religious diversity in the workplace. This means that social skills, apart from the usual hard skills like math and science, are becoming more valuable for jobs. Meanwhile, longer working lives and rapidly changing skills demands have increased the need for continuous learning throughout life. Taken together, we see a future labor market that will demand a lot from our students. If we fail to address this now, this will inevitably worsen the country's skill gaps and unemployment in the future. We are now seeing the need to upskill and increase the competencies of our students to prepare them for an ever-changing global economy. All the same, it also requires developing and empowering our education frontliners like yourselves so you can rise to the challenge of raising a new breed of resilient learners. In summary, it is really important that both government and civil society work together to ensure we are not left behind. If it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a country to raise a nation of leaders. Future-proofing our education sector means, among others, crafting long-term policies and programs that anticipate the challenges ahead. It also means investing in the technology and infrastructure to build more resilient classrooms and training our teachers to use them well. Lastly, it means recalibrating our teaching methods to prepare our students for the future world of work. The pandemic may have brought unprecedented challenges to our education system, but just the same, we are now seeing new paths that can take us beyond our old ways and even protect us from another crisis from disrupting our classrooms again. Ladies and gentlemen, in the next 2 days, I wish all of us can come together and exchange ideas on how to bring us closer to our desired future. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aniceto Sobrepeña, or we fondly call him Sir Chito, for that very lovely keynote speech. My very competent and handsome partner here will now be presenting the Certificate of Recognition to Mr. Aniceto Sobrepeña. Sir Dom?
Yeah, Doc Mercy, thank you very much for the compliments. On behalf of Noted, we would like to award this certificate of recognition to Sir Chito. And the certificate reads, Metro Bank Foundation Network of Outstanding Teachers and Educators Incorporated Certificate of Recognition is presented to Aniceto M. Sobrepeña, President, Metro Bank Foundation Incorporated, for sharing his expertise and insight as keynote speaker during the 3rd International Noted Conference with the theme Equity, Solidarity, and Engagement, Purposive Education in Times of Change, held on October 8 to 9, 2021 via Microsoft Teams, given as 8th day of October 2021. Signed, Ernilea P. Cal, PhD, Vice President Noted and Chair Program Committee. Signed, Josephine M. Calamlam, PhD, President Noted and overall Chair, 3rd International Noted Conference. Let's give a virtual round of applause to Sir Chito Sobrepeña. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, Dom, and congratulations, Sir Chito. We are very happy to see you here on this Microsoft team. We are just pleased that you really graced this occasion. Thank you very much. Now, Dom, I understand that this international conference is well attended.
Absolutely, Ma'am Mercy. Here in Microsoft Teams, I can see more than 100 participants in attendance right now.
Wow, having said that, may I request Mrs. Olivia Esguerra Kaling, SOT 2006 awardee, or the incumbent secretary of the Network of Outstanding Teachers and Educators Noted, to recognize our participants. Ma'am Kaling?
Yes, hello everyone and welcome. At this point, allow me to recognize our foreign participants coming from Mexico, Indonesia, Canada, and Australia. Of course, we would like to recognize our dear participants from the 3 main islands, our country, Philippines, from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And of course, last but not the least, our dear and well-respected guest, our keynote speaker, Sir Chito Sobrepeña, our plenary speakers whom you're going to meet later on, our Deputy Secretary, Secretary Briones, our Metrobank Foundation's officers and staff, our noted board and members, past presidents of Noted, and of course, our technical working group. And to capture this very momentous occasion, I would like to request our keynote speaker, our plenary speakers, our DepEd official, and guests from Metrobank Foundations and officers and staff, and of course, our noted board to turn on the cameras. And for the others, please turn off the camera for our photo documentation. Okay, I think we're ready now. Ready? Good smile, please. All right. Smile. Okay, thank you. Next, may I request our noted board to remain with the technical working group. And members of Noted. And the rest, please turn off your camera. All right. Thank you. I think we're done. Next, Noted board, please remain. And we'll take a shot with the past presidents of Noted. The rest, please turn off your camera.
May we ask for the tech to stop sharing first so that we can capture the
Yes.
photos of all those who are shown in the screen.
All right. I think we're done. All right. Next set. Noted board, please remain with the past presidents and noted members. All right. I think we're done. Next group, we have the noted board, past presidents, members of noted, and all the participants.
Okay. So everyone there in the room,
please open your cameras, turn on your cameras.
the others are shy. They don't like to open their cameras.
Okay. All right, I think we're done. So have a nice day. I'm giving the floor to our MCs again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much, Ma'am Olive, for that very orderly photo opportunity. We shall now take a 10-minute health break. When we return, we shall begin with our first plenary session. So take note, 10 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so we see you again after 10 minutes.
Congratulations, noted.
Thank you
Nice
very
to
much,
see all of you. Mercy.
Thank you, Sir Chito.
Thank you, Sir
Thank
Chito.
Joji, Alan.
Thank you, sir.
Rizal, Laura. See you in a bit.
Thank you, Sir Tito. Great to see you po. God bless.
Great job, team.
Thank you, Sir Chito, for the support.
Thank you for the support.
Yes. Thank you to our technical team, the technical working group.
Can we play a little bit upbeat music so that they can stretch? Yeah. So next we will be listening to 3 powerhouse speakers. I can hardly wait. Thank you, Sir Chito, for setting the tone for this conference. Thank you so much. We learned a lot.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Sir Nani, I guess we should tell the participants that they take a selfie of themselves. Okay, a selfie with maybe with what they are watching. Okay, with a screen, and they will send it to the noted secretariat. Okay, sige. Please watch out for some announcements in the chat box so you can participate with our other pakulo with some treats for you. So I'm happy to see some friends here like Ate Vicky. Yan, they are non-noted members, but I'm very thankful for believing in the cause of this conference.
Aray, okay. Meron din. Ikaw, no? Ikaw, online.
Joji, we can invite them already to join next year's Search for Outstanding Filipino Teacher.
Yes.
Bukas
Actually,
na po yun.
sir.
Year-round na po ang ating application and nomination for Metrobank.
Maybe, sir, we can flash on the screen the link. Okay, maybe some steps on how to apply.
Yeah. Si Tal is in the room, so if you can share something there.
Yes. And many of our participants here are potential outstanding teachers. I believe so. may I have this opportunity to invite, all our educators there from elementary, junior high school, senior high school, up to tertiary level, up to graduate level, to please join the next year's search for Outstanding Filipinos
Award
Teacher
for teachers.
Appreciation category. Okay? So, yan. It will be again an exciting round of search, just like what happened this year's 2021 search. So everything was done virtually. Nakakatuwa. So it's really a very, very new experience. Yan. Maybe at lunchtime, we can also share the information on how you will join the next year's search for Outstanding Filipinos.
Hello, everyone. Please check the chat box for the link to the nomination form for 2022. It is actually open now. It has been open year-round, and some are already submitting their nomination form. So, may I enjoin you, all of you here, who are eligible. You are 10 years already in as a teacher, then why not join our award for OF Award 2020?
All right, so thank you for that invitation, Ms. Tal. And we will be, may I remind everyone that we will be resuming like in 1 minute. So instead of having 10 minutes, we're cutting it short to less than 10 minutes, right? So in a minute, we shall resume, all right?
Yes. I am excited for the poster presentation, okay, happening this afternoon. So please come back and you can how do you call it? You can go to different rooms, no, of our poster presenters. They will be there to meet you, no? So if you have some questions about their presentation, about their research, or about their work, so you just feel free, no, to learn from each other. Feel free to ask questions, and that's really an opportune time for you to network, no, with researchers.
Right, Ma'am Georgie. So if you are excited, we are excited as well for that afternoon session. With that being said, we shall now resume with our program. So I think we are ready for the first plenary lecture. Our first plenary lecture is on equity and volatility, converting challenges to opportunities accessible to all. To give our first plenary speaker due introduction, may I turn you over to my excellent co-host, Professor Dom, for the introduction of the speaker. Sir Dom?
Yeah, thank you, Doc Mercy. Our first speaker is Dr. Bert J. Tuga, and it is my pleasure to introduce him to the body. Dr. Bert J. Tuga is the 11th president of the Philippine Normal University, the National Center for Teacher Education. Prior to his current post, he has occupied the following positions in the university: the Vice President for Finance and Administration, the Vice President for University Relations and Advancement, and Campus Executive Director and Provost of PNU Visayas. Dr. Tuga finished his PhD in Curriculum and Instruction in 2016 from the Philippine Normal University and completed a PhD sandwich program for his dissertation at the Ohio State University, USA. Outside PNU, Dr. Tuga serves as Executive Director of the United Nations Association of the Philippines, Regional Chair, Philippine Association of State Universities and Colleges, NCR, Executive Vice President and Vice President for Luzon, Philippine Association of Extension Program Implementers Incorporated, Board Member of the Philippine Association for Teachers of Educational Foundations, and a member of the core team of Asia Pacific Network on Global Citizenship Education. He is also an alumnus of COICA Fellowship Program on Higher Education Policy Development. Dr. Tuga also serves as a lead consultant of an international project on global citizenship education implemented by UNESCO Bangkok. Fellow educators, it is our pleasure to bring you Dr. Bert J. Tuga.
Thank you very much, Sir Dom. On behalf of the Philippine Normal University, I wish to extend our best wishes and congratulations to the Network of Outstanding Teachers and Educators on your third international conference. I prepared a recorded video presentation to avoid connectivity issues, but I'll be staying after the end of my video for our virtual engagement. May I request the technical team to show my video? Thank you. To the network of outstanding teachers and educators, thank you for inviting me to your conference. It is a great honor and privilege to be with you in this virtual gathering and talk about how we as teachers and leaders in education could transform the present challenges that threaten education into opportunities to innovate and thrive in the post-pandemic world. This conference is an important step to jumpstart our goal to make education more accessible to everyone, regardless of their background and situation. In 2020, all sectors of society suffered from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite closing their borders, national governments all over the world struggled to contain and prevent the spread of the virus. The health sector found itself understaffed, working extra shifts, and were under extreme pressure to find a cure to the virus. Business establishments were forced to cease operations and opted for delivery services. The education sector was not spared. The imposition of lockdowns and quarantine protocols meant that schools also have to close its classrooms and find a way to conduct remote learning. According to a UNESCO data, around 63 million primary and secondary teachers around the world is affected by school closures in 165 countries due to COVID-19 pandemic. By mid-April of 2020, every country in the world had implemented nationwide closures of schools and other educational institutions in response to the COVID pandemic, affecting over 1.57 billion learners, representing over 90% of the world's total enrolled student population. Likewise, in the global monitoring of school closures by UNESCO, in the Philippines, there are a total of 28,451,212 affected learners. And as of October of 2021, schools in the Philippines remain closed due to COVID-19, except those under pilot testing scheme and those that were allowed for limited face-to-face instruction. Schools in the Philippines, in general, has been closed for 49 weeks now. Because of the pandemic, majority of governments utilize different modalities to safeguard the continuity of education. Schools and teachers are required to utilize various digital learning management systems, synchronous and asynchronous classes, and modules to provide students and teachers the necessary tools to learn in the safety of their homes. The pandemic highlighted the inequalities and flaws in the current condition of the education system. It made us realize that we are still operating within a paradigm that hinges on the primacy of traditional classrooms and teaching modalities. Similarly, the digital divide has shown us that education, students, and the teaching profession is not compatible with the emerging technologies in the fourth industrial revolution yet. Our unique situation during this pandemic offers important insights that could help us determine the future of education. My talk today will therefore focus on identifying the key challenges that we have encountered during this pandemic and offer possible solutions that we can adapt and or reflect on to pave our way towards recovery. The COVID-19 presents us with numerous challenges that profoundly affected our lives and our work, and in the time of the pandemic, these aspects of our lives were defined and characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. The article Rethinking Teacher Education in a VUCA World, Student-Teacher Socio-Emotional Competencies During the COVID-19 Crisis, outlined VUCA in the context of the pandemic as the fluctuations and turbulence level of confidence in predicting the future, lack of clarity about how to interpret something given incomplete, contradicting, or inaccurate information, and how a situation or reality itself is affected by multiple factors that interact with each other. VUCA is deeply embedded in the adjustments that multiple sectors had to make to transition into the new normal. VUCA is deeply embedded in the adjustments that multiple sectors had to make to transition into the new normal. Furthermore, volatility is expressed in the inability to have a solid grasp of the current learning modality due to the fact that teaching strategies in the virtual classrooms are different and dependent on which platform is utilized. This results in the lack of consistency and comprehensiveness in approaching education and learning. And since learning is dependent on the virtual platform or modality, students feel as if they do not have control over the learning experience. Similarly, students are not confident with the quality of education they are receiving during the pandemic, saying that they are merely submitting requirements as a form of compliance rather than as actual learning itself. Students are not the only ones who are affected by VUCA. Teachers as well experience this by adjusting their teaching strategies to ensure that it will be inclusive as possible. They are also affected to formulate and design their strategies on the concept of empathy without compromising the quality of assessment and evaluation. With this constantly in mind, teachers as well as school and education leaders are confronted by conflicting and multiple factors as to how learning should be delivered to their learners. The dialectics of VUCA greatly affects how schools and institutions position themselves within the pandemic. This means that while teachers and school leaders continue to design and implement creative approaches to online modalities, students are always in the constant state of anxiety and uncertainty because new strategies will also entail changing the existing routines that students have already adopted for themselves. This also applies to education professionals as new studies on effective teaching practices in the context of the pandemic. Teachers and education leaders are required to adjust their existing methodologies and approaches. Amplifying the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity of education and learning in the time of crisis is the tangible and real-life realities that either help or hinder students and teachers from fully utilizing the virtual classroom as a place for productive and meaningful learning. A good example of this is how the pandemic highlighted the digital divide. The digital divide pertains to the gap between demographics and regions that have access to modern information and communications technology and those that do not have or have restricted access to such technologies. This technology can be in the form of telephone, television, computers, and the internet. Since the beginning of the pandemic, many schools in the Philippines and around the world have deployed their different learning management systems to deliver remote learning to their students. Many schools have utilized digital and virtual platforms such as Google Classroom and Zoom meetings as an alternative replacement to the physical classroom. For schools who are unable to utilize online learning, they have opted for the preparation, printing, and distribution of learning modules to students, especially those who are living in remote area and do not have access to technology and connectivity. However, despite the efforts of education institutions to provide teachers and students to have a conducive learning environment, many still struggle to cope with the sudden transition. While many schools are able to find a stable footing in virtual spaces, there are still those who were left behind due to lack of access to the internet and other means of connectivity and gadgets. The crucial role of gadgets in online learning also proved to be an added burden to students and teachers. Online modality requires students to have at least decent working laptop or smartphone to attend classes, which are extremely costly. This means that not all students, even teachers, have the ability to purchase gadgets and have access to a stable internet connection. And while there are internet services available in the country, the perennial problem of slow internet speeds further prevented teachers and students from participating in class. According to the World Bank, at 16.76 megabytes per second, the Philippines' mobile broadband speed is much lower than the global average speed of 32.01 Mbps. In the region, the 3G or 4G mobile average download speed stands at 13.26 Mbps compared to only 7 Mbps in the Philippines. Additionally, a study conducted by Georgia State University School of Public Health concluded that the transition to purely online classes increased academic workload. The increase in workload was primarily in the form of new assignments that were added, including journalism, written assignments, reflection papers, monitoring quizzes, and discussion posts. With this increased academic workload, some students struggled to find time to study and meet their requirements while also helping their family in house chores or their part-time jobs. Prior to the pandemic, students, particularly working students, are able to draw a clear distinction between their school life and personal life. But because of the pandemic, these lines started to converge, thus hampering them from managing their times properly. Of course, this varies from student to student, but the fact remains the socioeconomic background of the students and even teachers affects how they participate in online classes. In a survey conducted by Active Minds, about 20% of college students said that their mental health has significantly worsened during the pandemic. The New York Times article, "There's a Name for the Blah You Are Feeling, It's Called Languishing," captured the stress, anxiety, and frustration experienced by many students. According to the article, languish is not functioning at full capacity. Languishing dulls your motivation, disrupts your ability to focus, and triples the odds that you will cut back on works. It appears to be more common than major depression, and in some ways, it may be a bigger risk factor for mental illness. This feeling of languish is illustrated by a sense of stagnation and emptiness. It feels as if you are muddling through your days, looking at your life through a windshield. The mental toll of the pandemic urged students to voice out their frustration via online campaigns, asking for the government to suspend classes or provide academic breaks. At the core of this clamor for academic breaks is the reality that teachers and students are struggling to meet the demands and expectations of the current learning modality due to the following: unstable internet connection or lack of access thereof, an inability to purchase necessary gadgets to participate in online classes, inadequate learning resources, poor access to learning modalities, and overloaded academic requirements, and conflict and or lack of boundaries with personal life, schoolworks, and family duties, leading to stress, anxiety, and that feeling of languish and other mental health issues. As teachers and education leaders, it is our responsibility to ensure that such challenges will never endanger education in the country. Similar to our students, we in the teaching profession also grappled with the effects of the pandemic. However, we do not have the privilege to complain because the future of education depends on us. We are the key to mapping up a decisive plan to build a stronger and more stable foundation for Philippine education in the new normal and the post-pandemic era. In the past year and a half, we have exhausted our resources, our skills, and time to identify the key challenges that radically transformed and changed education. The past months of hardship, sacrifices, and trials and errors have now equipped us with holistic and humanistic approach to education. The pandemic offered us the opportunity to reflect and evaluate the current condition of Philippine education with all these newfound insights, skills, and knowledge. It is only appropriate to translate them into actions. That is the reason why we are having this conference, to share and discuss ideas on how we can apply our experiences into our practice. In order to create a stronger and better Philippine education, we must first direct our attention to making reforms in the professional development in the teaching profession. This pertains to providing teachers the opportunity to improve their practices by equipping them with the competencies to use and integrate technologies as they transition to a hybrid teaching modality that combines traditional approaches to education with online modality. This professional development should be anchored on building competencies such as the capacity to integrate ICTs and other traditional technologies in their teaching activities and shift from in-person to remote or online and hybrid learning modalities. Adjust curricula and assessment strategies to new realities of remote and online learning and hybrid learning. Cater for their learners' well-being as well as for their own, either their own families or their personal well-being. Engage in new forms of teacher professional development, taking advantage of the potential of ICTs as well as of traditional technologies in enhancing teacher networking and community of practice. Work with their peers in jointly planning meaningful learning activities for students and in learning from one another in the context of flexible and mutually beneficial communities of practice. And demonstrate initiatives and leadership in finding appropriate, customized solutions for their specific context and learners as a combination of traditional and innovative approaches. For that reason, teacher education must be revitalized and empowered. Future teachers and education leaders must be given the right tools and environment to develop hybrid teaching modalities, and this must be embedded in teacher education as early as pre-service training. This will help prepare teachers and education professionals to be prepared should the same crisis happen in the future. The pandemic clearly illustrated the importance and effectiveness of digital technologies in education. It also reminded us that hybrid modalities such as remote and flexible learning is a possible future for education. Hence, we need to focus all our efforts to sustaining the innovation that we have cultivated during the COVID-19 crisis. As we move beyond the pandemic, governments must accelerate transformation of education systems into more equitable and inclusive learning systems, and education leaders have a key role to play. This calls for their active participation and inclusion in decision-making and to sharing the knowledge they produce to different stakeholders. To expedite and encourage the safe reopening of schools, the national governments should prioritize the insights and recommendations from the education sector in the planning and implementation of health guidelines and protocols. In an editorial posted by the International Task Force on Teachers for Education 2030, the Chief Regional Coordinator for Africa for Education International, Dennis Signolo, pointed out that involving teachers in policy making profoundly enhances the quality and relevance of educational policies. For this to happen, social dialogue is of critical importance and it needs to be institutionalized and legislated. Teachers are more than just implementers of policy and curriculum. They have the on-the-ground perspectives that allows them to identify needs and help better budget them. That is why it is vital to include teachers and teacher unions from an early stage while making decisions about planning, monitoring, evaluation, and implementation. The pandemic has brought the scale of the global equity challenge into focus, and school and system leaders are critical to addressing it. During the crisis, the best leaders have acted as champions for all students, especially the most vulnerable. These leaders have focused on the impact of the pandemic to disadvantaged students. This impact notably includes students' well-being, but leaders also had to consider well-being and equity in the broader education ecosystem, for instance, among teachers and their families. The COVID-19 crisis has clearly demonstrated that the health of education systems is linked to the well-being of communities, with the disadvantaged often faring worst. Leaders need support and training to help them better ensure the well-being of their students and their teachers and staff. In Malaysia, we heard that school leaders receive full training on how to support students' emotional and mental well-being as schools reopened. Students were also surveyed on their home learning situations to enable staff to look out for signs of trauma, which also serves as an example of the strategic use of data. This focus on equity and well-being will remain critical as schools reopen and countries try to build more resilient education systems. Linking all of these principles together is the conviction that education systems must transform even more quickly in the wake of the current emergency to avoid exacerbating the learning crisis. Effective leaders will be instrumental in transforming systems, but policymakers, development partners, and civil society organizations, among others, will need to support and empower them to effect meaningful change and create more equitable, resilient, and responsive systems for our future. But before we become too excited with innovating, we need to ask ourselves, why are we doing this? And what is our goal for doing this? Who are we building these more equitable, resilient, accessible, and responsive education systems for? The answer to that question can be found in the cliché statement that we have been using as a battle cry when the pandemic started. No student left behind. Our response to that question will link everything that we have learned during the pandemic, our innovative response to the challenges of online learning, and our newfound understanding of education. All these things will culminate to an inclusive, accessible, and equitable education system that can endure and surmount future disruptions. The Alliance for Excellent Education provided a few recommendations for prioritizing equity, which includes the following: distributing resources equitably among high poverty and low poverty schools within districts or divisions. Coordinate and address students' growing academic, economic, social, and emotional needs by expanding screening, mapping the availability of local services, and integrating student supports. Provide ongoing access to mental health supports to students and families during and after the pandemic. Purchase and distribute connectivity and computer hardware necessary for all students to participate in remote instruction while prioritizing purchases for which there's a greater and long-term potential for use. Providing immediate training and support for educators to deliver remote instruction while building long-term capacity to deliver high-quality online learning as a primary or supplemental instructional tool, and ensure remote learning is accessible for all students, including those with disabilities. Combining these recommendations with our own personal, on-the-ground experience of the pandemic will surely enable us to achieve our collective goals and objectives for Philippine education: equitable, resilient, accessible, and responsive. To summarize, to transcend the volatile nature of education in the COVID-19 world, and to bring education into a more equitable, accessible, and stable ground, we must be aggressive in bringing reforms into our approach to education. This will start in teacher education by equipping pre-service teachers the right tools and environment to develop skills in digital literacy, as well as provide them the chance to integrate both traditional strategies and digital technologies in their teaching practices. Furthermore, the same training and opportunities and support must also be provided to in-service teachers and leaders as a form of continuing professional development. The next step is to encourage government agencies, non-government organizations, civil societies, and other partners in education to recognize the crucial role of education professionals in planning and implementing policies regarding education. Insights from education practitioners will properly contextualize any education policies and reforms. When teacher education and policy recommendations are utilized properly, that is the only time that we can concretely transform the challenges we encountered during this crisis into opportunities to innovate and promote accessible and equitable education for all. The future of education is dependent on how we act in this unprecedented time. When the pandemic hit us, we were not prepared. We did not expect that it will massively change our lives. We thought that we can easily surmount it with our current understanding of education. We were strong. As we struggled, persevered, and endured the ramifications of the pandemic, we find ourselves in a process of unlearning. And in this process, we discovered that we have been stagnant for a long time. The pandemic was a chance to innovate and understand education and learning from a different perspective. And now that we are equipped with new skills and knowledge, all we have to do is to sustain, practice, and continue innovating. At this juncture, I would like to thank Noted Incorporated for inviting me to our conference. I hope that this talk is able to share something valuable and insightful to our teachers and educators in the field as you do your work every day to improve the Philippine education system for the sake of our Filipino learners. Padayon and happy World Teachers Day.
Thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Dr.
Thank you.
Tuka. Yeah, that was indeed a very insightful and comprehensive talk. Thank you very much.
So thank you, President Bert Tuga, for your thought-provoking talk. So relevant that you gave our conference participants insights, no, to ride the tide of change. I am witness to how you have led PNU to convert challenges to opportunities. Okay, so as Dr. Bert promised that he will be staying on for the open forum, I would like to suggest the conference for the conference participants to please post your questions in our chat box so that we can manage our time. Rest assured that our speaker will attend to your questions. Okay, so I am now bringing the floor back to our MCs for the presentation of our certificate of recognition to our speaker.
All right, so we shall now have the presentation of the certificate of Dr. Bertuga. All right, so certificate of recognition is awarded to Dr. Bert J. Tuga, President, Philippine Normal University, for delivering a relevant and insightful plenary talk entitled Equity and Volatility, Converting Challenges to Opportunities Accessible to All during the 3rd International Noted Conference with the theme Equity, Solidarity, and Engagement, Purposive Education in Times of Change, held on October 8 to 9, 2021 via Microsoft Teams. Given this 8th day of October 2021, signed by Dr. Ernelea P. Cao and Dr. Josephine M. Kalamlam, PhD. So congratulations, Dr. Bird, and thank you very much for that very comprehensive message.
Thank you also.
Partner?
Yeah, we will proceed now to the open forum, right, Ma'am Mercy?
We shall have for the open forum, it was announced by Ma'am Joji that they will just have their questions posted on our chat pane. And Dr. Tuga will try to manage those questions as we go along. So don't worry if your questions are not, if you are not called here. Now, in the interest of time, we are inviting everyone to ask questions via our chat pane. Okay? So therefore, we are now going to our second plenary lecture. Partner?
Yeah, thank you.
Take it away.
To introduce our second plenary speaker who will speak about responding to volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, may I call on my partner, Doc Mercy.
All right. So Professor Chris Forlin is an international education consultant specializing in supporting governments and school systems to implement effective, equitable, and quality inclusive education. She has worked in the field of education for more than 40 years as a teacher, university lecturer, and government advisor. Her work with teachers is extensive. Her extant research and publications focus on education reform and systemic support for children and youth with disabilities, and development of inclusive curriculum and pedagogy with a particular emphasis on inclusion in developing countries. Her recent researches include a historical ethnography of the enactment of Rawls' theory of justice as applied to the education of learners with disability in Western Australia, homeschool collaboration in assessment, placement, and individual education plan development for children with special education needs in Macau. The Views of Parents, a historical review from exclusion to inclusion in Western Australia across the past 5 decades. What have we learned? Diversity and inclusion and special education and transition programs for children and youth with diverse needs. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Chris Forlin.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for that.
Good morning.
Now, let's see if we can get the PowerPoint to work. Now, according to my screen, it says I'm sharing, but I can't see the PowerPoint. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, Mom, we see it.
You can see it. Excellent.
Yes,
That's fantastic. Okay. Well, that's really good news after some of the challenges we've had this morning. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this conference. While it's a pity that I've been unable to actually travel to come over there, it's lovely to see so many people online as we work through these wonderful presentations. I was really inspired and motivated by Sir Chito's initial welcome this morning. He spoke so passionately about what it means to be a teacher and what it means to be an excellent teacher, and certainly a teacher in the Philippines. And the song that you played at the beginning, What a Wonderful World, isn't that an inspiring way to start? We do have a wonderful world, and it's made wonderful because of the work that's done in many ways by teachers in all the different countries. Now, can you see my first PowerPoint screen, please? Okay, I'm assuming as I'm getting no feedback that people can see this. That's not yet the shared screen, somebody is telling me, so bear with me, I will try again. It says I'm sharing.
Yes, ma'am. We see the
Yes,
PowerPoint.
we can see your
Oh,
PowerPoint.
good. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well,
Yes.
I'll keep going. If you lose it or you lose my voice, just somebody put a message up in the message box, please. So I'd like to start, as the other speakers have done, by congratulating the network of outstanding teachers and educators. I hadn't realized how long that this noted has been going, and it's absolutely wonderful that you've been able to maintain it for that period of time. And it's really lovely to be able to know that the new teachers who have just joined Noted are now available online and are keen to take their new role forward. Thank you. So well done, people. So I want to start by talking about, now you've become a Note, what is your role going to be? Well, as you're probably already aware, there's been a huge change in the role of the teacher, not imminently, but over the last probably 20 or 30 years, where a traditional teacher was always renowned to be the expert, and they were the transmitter of knowledge. But over the last 20 years, there's been a very slow but definite change towards the teacher no longer being the expert, but seen more in the 21st century as a facilitator. A person who is able to engage others in their own learning. A person who can provide the right environment so that all students can learn. Now, not many of you will have been around in the 1960s, but I was. And there was a wonderful song by Bob Dylan, but you may well know the song. And it was called The Times They Are A-Changing. Well, they were changing enormously in the 1960s, particularly internationally. And over time, every century, every decade, every year, times are changing, and they are certainly changing at the moment. And some of the biggest changes are what we've been talking about already. Dr. Tuga was talking about this when he was talking about the VUCA changes. And I want to just take those changes now and put them in the context of schools and schooling and teachers and inclusive education. So when we look at volatility, schools are in a constant state of change. Now, this has not changed. Schools are always in a constant state of change, but certainly the uncertainty of that change and the unprecedented change that we've had in the last 2 years was completely unforeseen. We are very much living in unpredictable times. And along with this, we have huge complexity in our schools. There has been increasing diversity of student needs, and more so, as those of you who are teachers will certainly know, is the expectation for teachers. Dr. Tong highlighted the complexity for teachers in the Philippines, which was very interesting to hear. And he also spoke about the multiple factors that contribute to these. It's not just one or two issues, and it's certainly not just the COVID-19. It's a whole range of other issues. And the ambiguity that we now have, how can we define and enable equity for all students? And again, Dr. Tuga spoke about many of the challenges in the Philippines, particularly regarding different access to and different opportunities for participating in learning. So what I want to talk about for a few moments now is the importance of research, because we need to not just make ideas about what we want to do without really looking at what's happening and taking from what is happening the best ideas and the best practices and then trialing them in our own context to see if they work. Now, UNESCO has updated their data regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. And they are saying that this is having a disproportionate impact on learners with special needs. And as we know, these were already experiencing social and educational disadvantage. Initially, we had estimated 65 million primary and lower and secondary school age children with disabilities in developing countries prior to COVID were already out of school. But UNESCO suggests that with the temporary school closures, this is now elevated to something like 290 million children being denied their right of education because of an inability to access schooling. The UNESCO data summarizes a couple of key points here. Access to and participation in education is more difficult for vulnerable population groups. And with COVID-related school closures, many countries have turned to online instruction to ensure continuity of learning. Now, online isn't just one specific way of teaching. It's a whole range of different ways that you can access teaching. And as we've already experienced this morning, it doesn't always run as smoothly as we would like it to. But you have to be persistent and you have to keep on trying in order to succeed. Now, the Asia and Pacific branch of UNESCO did a separate report in 2020, and that they said that the crisis such as COVID-19, which we're experiencing at the moment, is that the people with disabilities are provided with less help and inadequately trained teachers. It's been extremely hard for regular class teachers who over the last 5 to 10 years have had to include students with a range of diverse needs in their classes who often complain that they weren't trained to do that. Now they still have these students in their classes, but they've also got a layer on top of that of the fact they're having to teach them in an online environment, which is even more challenging for those with special needs. We need more time and resources for these students if they're going to actively participate in learning. And this includes specialised equipment, internet access, which has already been spoken about quite a lot, and the challenges in the Philippines, and specially designed materials and support. And in addition, this is a costly exercise. So where is all this money coming from? How are we getting the money out to the children and the teachers and the parents and the families who need it so their children can participate? So there's been a lot of research written over the last probably 12 months. It started a couple of years ago, but over the last 12 months, there's been a lot of work written about the impact of COVID-19 in different countries. Now, Seamus Hegarty took one of his European Journal Special Needs Education volumes, and he did a special issue on the impact of COVID-19 on special education, and I highly recommend this to you if you're able to access it. There were a lot of articles written in there from a wide range of different perspectives, but I want to try and take from those articles a summary of what the people were saying regarding international impact of COVID-19. So the first two areas, which seem to come through in quite a lot of the articles, was home as a quarantine school. This was meant for many families that there were new demands on the students, the parents, and the teachers. Particularly for parents, these weren't trained teachers, and many of them still had to continue working at home. And on top of this, they were then required to teach, or at least to supervise the teaching of their students. For many students with disabilities, it was a completely different workspace for these children, and they found it really hard to be able to cope with that. For them, there was a loss of daily structure, a loss of routine, which, as we know, is very important for our children with special needs. There was a loss of daily structure with limited accountability for what was happening at home in relation to what normally will be happening in school. For many students, they experience social marginalisation, and there was a big homeschool overlap and a lot of conflict for parents between, well, here's my teaching hat, here's my home hat, how am I going to work the two together? The second area which was a big issue was what we tend to call school connectedness. And because of the limited face-to-face contact, there was often minimal contact with teachers, with some children not having any contact on a daily basis, and others maybe only being able to log in for half an hour a day. There was no peer playtime, so they had to play with their siblings or their village or if there was people in the town where they lived. The lack of participation and a lack of feeling of belonging came through in many areas. There was less teacher support, and often students had low levels of self-efficacy. Parents were very much dissatisfied in many instances with the amount of school support, and this varied enormously. And I'm sure as teachers, you can all empathise with all of these comments. The third area that was of note was teachers' preparedness. Now, many teachers internationally went to extraordinarily strong lengths to address student needs. They needed to adapt instruction, they needed to monitor attendance, they needed to look at how they were going to support the behaviour of the children and how they were going to engage them in the learning progress. They had to deal with crisis management. When you've got a child who is absolutely desperate in need of support and is at the other end of an online environment where you can't go up and give that close-to-close support. And teachers were working under unprecedented pressure and also emotional strain. Many of them were working from home. In fact, most of them would have been working from home in the Philippines, and they had their own families to deal with while at the same time trying to teach online. And then the fourth area, as we would expect, was the digital online learning. Now, the strongest predictors from all the research of teachers using digital learning related to not just their own self-efficacy in being able to use it, but interestingly, it related to the support they got from the school leader, their principal, while they were working from home. And the teachers had enormous varying degrees of experience with technology. So how are you going to deal with volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity in these times? Well, I think we need to take the fact that challenges, while they might be difficult, they are opportunities for you to grow. The more you learn, the more equipped you are to handle whatever situations come up. By now, you've probably come to terms with how to work online, but that doesn't mean to say you're not still learning. If we create a culture where every teacher believes they need to improve, not because they're not good enough, but because they can be even better, there's no limit to what we can achieve. You've been all selected as really great teachers. But as great teachers, I'm sure you'd be the first ones to admit that you don't know everything and that it's important to keep learning. So before we move on to what we need to change, let's look at what stays the same when we're talking about teaching. Let's look at the opposite of VUCA. So instead of things being volatile, constancy is the main important issue here. And what's constant? Well, we still have kids, we still have education, and we still have learning. That doesn't change. What's changing is the way we're doing it. Moving from an uncertain one, we still have some certain things. Teachers are going to be responsible for doing this, and I can all hear you sigh, yes, a lot of work comes back onto the teacher. There's going to be a continued lack of funds. You're never going to get enough money. Teachers never have enough money to be able to do everything they want to do. There's going to be enormous variation in support, and there's going to be insufficient training of teachers. A lot of it you're going to have to do yourself. So instead of it being complex, what's simple? Well, teachers are really good at engaging their students. They're really good at establishing a feeling of belonging so all students feel as though they're welcome. They're really good at developing a rapport with their students and supporting them, particularly through a whole range of issues. And instead of being ambiguous, what's unambiguous is that you will need to continue to teach the curriculum. You will need to continue to develop a pedagogy that is appropriate for your children. And schooling will definitely change. What will be the school of the future? It will be nothing like we have at the moment. So how are you going to enable a sense of belonging and school connectedness during online learning? This was one of the key issues that arose from the research that was in that article that I was sharing with you from Seamus. Well, a great teacher takes a hand, opens a mind, and touches a heart. So how are you going to do that? By developing school connectedness. Well, school connectedness involves 4 aspects. It involves some form of bonding with adult support, positive peer relations, and a commitment to education. It involves developing attachment, where you have an environment where everybody feels as though they belong. It involves developing engagement, where people are committed to education, and a climate where adults are providing appropriate support and the environment allows for that connectedness to happen. Now, the research that they did looked specifically at components during COVID-19 for teaching online students with special educational needs. And Angela Page wrote about this and highlighted 4 areas where their research found the importance of developing connectedness for children with special needs required you to look more specifically at these. The first thing was to look at learning materials. What is available? What is needed? How will these need to be adapted for children with special needs? The second one was to look at the capacity of students with special needs and their willingness to use technology. If they are non-verbal, if they're hearing impaired, if they're visually impaired, how are you going to adjust the environment to enable them to access the online environment? Thirdly was motivation and changes in routine. We all know that our students with special needs, certainly those with disabilities and those with difficulties in remaining on task, like routine, and they need to be constantly motivated. How are you going to bring that into the online environment? And fourthly, how are you going to risk further failure of these students? And these were the 4 key areas that when you're teaching students with special needs online, you need to be much more aware of. Inclusive education, as you know, requires a whole range of different aspects. It requires a whole school approach. But how are you going to do that when it's just you and your class of students online? It needs to be multidimensional. And how are you going to bring in the other support staff that would normally be with you in a school environment, like maybe occupational therapists, physiotherapists, speech therapists, psychologists, social workers? How are you going to bring those into your online learning? How are you going to collaborate with your stakeholders? How are you going to meet with the parents to get their feedback online? How are you going to ensure you have regular meetings with your principal and your staff to make sure you're all doing the same, you're all taking the same approach to engage your students? How are you going to involve the government and NGOs into your online learning? And how are you going to share this with the education and the community? These are all things you need to take into account if you are going to continue with your inclusive educational approach, which I know the Philippines holds really highly in their educational environment. Let's remind ourselves that while it may be hard, inclusion is not going to be changing the learner. Somehow you have to overcome the fact that you cannot change the learner who is trying to learn online, and that while the system stays the change, the child must adapt or fail is not an option, even though we are going online now and it's much harder to do that. We have to make sure that we remain flexible and that we change the system to allow teachers to meet the individual needs of all students, more so than ever before. And it was really interesting to hear, I think it was Dr. Tula who said earlier on this morning, a much greater focus is needed now on the individual students. And I'm pretty certain that that's what they're getting as teachers become more familiar with the online environment. So what can we do to address VUCA? By designing effective inclusive classrooms. Now, the examples I've got here can be used either face-to-face, and it's really good news to hear you're coming back with some piloting face-to-face classes now, but they can also be used online. So the first one is look at curriculum. The things that you as good teachers do, I'm sure already, is to look at applying universal design for learning when you're developing your program and looking at your curriculum. You need to look very carefully at the content to make sure that it's appropriate to be able to teach this in an online environment. You need to look at the modifications you're going to need to do to the content to enable all students to access it. Those who are gifted and talented may need more advanced content. Those who have learning difficulties may need it to be simplified, and you have to think in advance to be able to prepare this so it can be uploaded in the online environment. One positive of the online is it's very good for learning modes. You can provide visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and take little breaks. You had health breaks, but you can do breaks with students, jumping breaks, hopping breaks, skipping breaks, where you get them all up and moving around. Look at the expectations for your students. Do not expect them to be doing exactly the same as they would in a face-to-face environment. Look at what is practical and what is possible. And again, Dr. Tula was talking about that many of his students were complaining that the expectations were unrealistic, limited access to their teachers. Look at modifying assessments and, importantly, using an individual education plan. When it comes to looking at the pedagogy, think about how you are going to present. Maybe upload the work you're doing so that students who are unable to keep online due to the difficulty with the access to the internet may be able to follow in other ways and may be able to just listen to you via a telephone while they work through the pre-recorded and pre-shared PowerPoints or presentations. Look at how you're going to group your students together. Look at how you're going to engage them. What sort of peer support can you provide via the technology? And also make sure you know exactly what technology each of your students has access to and how they're coping with it. Because students with learning difficulties, students with disabilities, are unlikely to be putting their hands up and telling you all the issues unless you ask them how they're going and talk to their parents as well. And then look at co-teaching, bringing in guest teachers, bringing in guest speakers, bringing in the special education teacher to support what you're doing online. So the future directions then for implementing inclusive education as we cope with VUCA. What do we need to do? Well, we need to ensure greater flexibility in absolutely everything we do. And it's really good to hear that the Philippines seem to have really worked very hard at identifying what the issues are, what you need to do. And I'm delighted it's a pilot going back into the schools, into face-to-face system, because this will enable you to sort out any other issues and change the way you're working. We need to continue to improve the understanding and knowledge of inclusive education in an online environment. And I think this third point I've got here is one where the government particularly, and certainly teacher training institutions and universities, need to provide more training on leaders in schools, and the government needs to emphasize greater reliability on what they're doing rather than just assuming that they have all the skills to be able to lead their staff in these unprecedented times. Ensure equitable urban and rural education. Provide financial support at all levels, and this may be sending out technologies to students who are unable to purchase them themselves. Increase accountability. What are we doing now? Who's monitoring what we're doing? Improve the monitoring of the student outcomes. Provide better quality trained teachers and teacher educators, and we need to do this constantly. You are all selected as noted teachers, but I'm pretty sure that you would want more training and more emphasis on the ways you can continue to improve. And as noted teachers, one of your roles is going to be training other teachers in your school. review the use of technology, and respond to local contextual and cultural implications as they arise, as they are specific to all areas across the Philippines. And most importantly, something that many systems forget to do, and I don't know how far down the track you are with this in the Philippines, but establish a method for measuring progress towards specified inclusive targets. I've got something flashed up on my screen here, so, okay. Let's move on. Just a little glitch. Here we go. So, our last two slides then. Inclusive schooling. Even though it's now going to be probably not in an actual brick building for a while yet, it's going to be in an online environment, we still need to consider all of these things. We need to look at the ethos and the culture of what we're trying to do online. We need to look at the leadership and the staffing. We need to look at curriculum and pedagogy. We need to look at how can we develop this community of learners. We need to look at policy and practice and how we are going to install equity and engagement, particularly of our students with special educational needs. Outstanding teachers, those of you I'm talking to today, must take the lead in overcoming VUCA, enabling and facilitating change and preparing your colleagues for what we've heard a lot about, the new normal or the new future of schooling, to ensure that all learners are able to achieve desired outcomes. Thank you again for letting me come and talk to you, and congratulations again to these noted teachers. I think the inspiring talks that you've already had this morning and the wonderful leaders you've already got are going to help make this really happen for the Philippines.
Thank you very much, Dr. Forlin, for that very informative talk, and my personal thanks for accepting our invitation to share your expertise and insights on this relatively new information about VUCA to our teachers. I have a question in the chat box. I think this has stirred interest among our teachers from one of our noted members. Is the reference that you mentioned available on free open source? Is it an open access reference?
Are you talking about the edited journal by Seamus Hegarty?
Impact of COVID-19 on students with disability?
Yes, that's UNESCO. If you go to the UNESCO websites, there's the two. There's the European UNESCO website, their main one, and then there's the Asia Pacific one. And if you can't find them, just email me and I'll send it to you and you can share it with them.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Forlin. I'm sure our teachers will appreciate being able to access this reference. Yes. In the interest of time, we can entertain only one question, but I would encourage our participants to stay connected and share, interact in our chat box if Dr. Forlin can stay until after the third speaker. So at this point, to our MCs again for the certificate for Dr. Forlin. Thank you very much once again. Chris.
Partner?
Yeah, thank you very much again, Dr. Forlin. That was indeed a meaningful discussion and sharing. May we move on now to the presentation of the Certificate of Recognition to Doc Grace Forlin. And the certificate reads, Certificate of Recognition is awarded to Dr. Chris Forlin, International Education Consultant, University of Notre Dame, Australia, for delivering a relevant and insightful plenary talk entitled Responding to Volatility, Uncertainty, Complexity, and Ambiguity Through an Inclusive Lens, given this third international noted conference with the theme Equity, Solidarity, and Engagement, Purposive Education, Times of Change. Signed by Dr. Ernelea P. Cal, Vice President, noted, and also Dr. Josephine Calamlam, President, noted. Thank you very much, Dr. Forlin. Let's give her a virtual round of applause.
Thank you for that.
Congratulations, Dr. Chris Forlin, and thank you so much.
Many
so,
thanks.
partner, we are now ready for the third plenary session.
Yes, we are now ready to move on to our third plenary session. Our third plenary lecture is centered on solidarity and diversity, navigating complexities and ambiguities in the changing time. I have a high respect for this person as I met him up close and personal in our stint in Australia. He will be introduced to us by my partner, Dr. Labial. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Sir Dom. Nelson is a passionate international development practitioner who believes in the transformative power of education. He has designed and managed over 150 transformational education programs across 30 countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Pacific. His key advocacies include inclusive education, leadership development, women's empowerment, gender equity and social inclusion, participatory development, and mentoring. Nelson was born and raised in rural Philippines, particularly in General Santos, until he moved to Australia in 1995 at the age of 18, as he secured an Australian government scholarship to pursue a bachelor's degree in development studies at the Australian National University. He migrated in Australia in 2001, and he is a proud father of 3 wonderful kids. Nelson recently finished a Master in Leadership, through which he produced a research on leadership mentoring effectiveness. Nelson has been the Director of International Projects Unit of Queensland University of Technology, or QUT, in Australia since 2004. Friends, a virtual applause to Mr. Nelson Salansang.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ma'am Mercy and Dom, for those introductions. It's great to see you all, and I also would like to acknowledge the speakers before me. What a hard act to follow. It's great to hear from Sir Chito, Sir Bert, and of course Chris. It's nice to see you here, Bert. Chris. So folks, I think that I'm going to change the tone a little bit, because I certainly don't have a doctor in my my title. So I'm going to draw on my personal story. So I'd like to greet everyone. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat, at sana ay malusog tayong lahat at masaya. So I'm very honored by this opportunity to share my thoughts with such a notable group of people. And I would like to thank Metrobank Foundation and my beloved Noted for giving me this wonderful privilege. I also happen to be a year older today, so what a birthday gift this is. At the outset, let me declare a personal bias, which I also consider one of my greatest assets. My beloved mother is a retired public school teacher who taught over 25 years. I saw her begin her teaching career essentially as a volunteer teacher to the Bilaan tribes in the mountain fringes of Mindanao. And while she taught at Labangal Elementary School, she also taught the Badjaos in our neighborhood during the weekends. She was also involved in informal literacy for women in our community, teaching them life skills. So, folks, that's a really core information about my background. So please allow me to wish my mom. I think I invited her, but I'm just not so sure about their connectivity right now. So, and I would like to greet everyone here, meaningful World Teachers Day, although it's a couple of days late. You all deserve to be honored for your passion and your heroic contribution to humanity. And I would like to invite you all to give yourselves a self-hug right now and keep a distance from all the negativities. We should honor you because now more than ever, the role of teachers is just as important as the health frontliners. As teachers and mentors, you have the responsibility to keep educating and to foster continuous learning amidst VUCA brought by this global pandemic. You are also very important frontliners for a sustainable future. So, as mentioned in my introduction, I grew up in General Santos City, and I completed my primary and secondary education in the Philippines before coming to Australia. And growing up in the Philippines meant that I have experienced absolute poverty firsthand, including that feeling of having nothing, being powerless, uncertain, and anxious of the future. In fact, this pandemic has strongly reminded me of that childhood memory. And it reminded me of the communities in the Philippines and around the world. As I am speaking to you right now, I have a vivid image of my mom crying one morning because we had nothing to eat. And all we had was 1 peso, which allowed us to buy some salt to go with vegetables from our little garden and rice. So this was a familiar situation for us, of course. And unfortunately, I am sure that some of our friends there can relate to this kind of plight, which I broadly always labeled as poverty. But essentially, that situation was like an economic pandemic, because this clearly wasn't something that affected me alone. I know that poverty is quite endemic or pervasive. I grew up in what my classmates called squatters, and in that neighborhood, there was enormous economic poverty. And also, there were a lot more realities that looked like it was part of normal life. Homelessness, domestic violence, criminality, unemployment, juvenile delinquency, prostitution, child abuse, drug addiction, and at school, I saw blatant bullying and exclusion. I especially knew about this because for a time, I dropped out of school in 1983 when I was in grade 2, and I became a street child. Before getting a teaching item, my mom was working at a tuna cannery who didn't notice me being out of school because she had to go to work at 4 a.m. and be back at 6 p.m. She raised us as a single mother. And from a child's viewpoint, seeing those realities, although it seemed normal, gave lots of anxiety and a sense of chaos and complexity. In hindsight, those realities were an important part of my journey as an international development practitioner. But of course, at that time, it was clearly a crisis, just like now. But everyone has a breakthrough story, and I'll tell you mine now. On my high school graduation night, we went home to what I thought was a blackout. But I soon realized that my neighbors had lights. So it became clear to me that our line was cut, naputulan, because we didn't pay for it, or we couldn't pay for it. So I asked my mom how that happened, and she explained to me that it was either the electric bill or a new shoes for my graduation. She said she couldn't really make me miss my graduation. because I happened to be the class valedictorian and had a speech to make. That night, I decided I will find every way to change my reality. I vividly remember my mom reminding me that night that amidst the darkness, I may think that I'm being buried, but I was actually being planted. At 18, by God's grace, I secured an Australian government scholarship. And when I arrived in Australia, I soon realized that the realities I was experiencing in the Philippines were far from what's normal in some parts of the world. I knew I wasn't dreaming, but I thought it was unreal. From where I came from, Australia is a paradise. So much so that I promised myself that I would make Australia my home someday. And I did. My pursuit for education was definitely purposive and life-changing. My world has definitely changed, which gave me a new normal. But while I am thankful for my personal journey, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. On the positive side, what didn't kill me certainly made me stronger and better, I think. So I'm so grateful that my mom was a teacher because she led me and several of her students to a pathway that would change our realities. To cut the story short, I can personally attest to the power of transformational education. Education changed my realities. Education gave me hope. Hence, I pursued a career in international development and transformational education. It is my way of paying forward to the future generation. Inspired by my mom's journey as a single mother, I also support programs to do with women's empowerment and gender equality. And just for the record, while I am now an Australian citizen, I have been doing my bit for the Philippine education. For example, through the Australian funded program, I worked with the Department of Education and the National Council for Disability Affairs for a capacity building program that was instrumental in the development of the inclusive education policy in the Philippines. We have also hosted many Filipino teachers and educators, especially the most outstanding teachers awardees. I'm so grateful to Metrobank for giving us that opportunity to host them, mostly members of Noted, of course, for benchmarking study programs in Australia to learn about best practices in teaching and educational leadership. I also brought a group of inclusive education champions from Calabarzon to Australia, and they later became a lighthouse model for inclusive education. As early as 2015, I organized a fellowship program for participants from various teacher education providers on, believe it or not, fostering digital literacy. And I know that some of them are already making some contributions into fostering digital literacy in the Philippines. I'm saying that because education equipped me with the knowledge, skills, and right disposition. And I give credit to my teachers for teaching me the right values, the positive disposition, and practical competencies. I was fortunate enough to have teachers who have the heart to mentor me. They saw the potential that I couldn't see then, and they kept encouraging me. They supported me and inspired me. I remember a teacher personally offering to pay for my PTA fees and sending me to quiz bowls so that I can win monetary prizes. As simple as it sounds, but that helped me and my family a lot. So thank you. Ultimately, from my mom and several teachers, I was inspired by their sense of leadership, their ability to model the way, inspire a vision, and encourage my heart. Education was the essential tool that I used to navigate through what we now call VUCA. I'm sharing this reflection because I wanted to highlight that the pandemic has highlighted, if not heightened, the miseries and sad realities that has long been existing in many communities and many people around the world. And my heart goes out especially for the children who are currently experiencing the complexities and who are vulnerable. Those children with disability, those children from far-flung areas, children who live with poor families. As I say, there's the image of a child somewhere in the street of General Santos City and elsewhere in the world who struggles to study under a street light using a printed module is virtually hounding me. That child couldn't go online because the parents may have phones, but they are also busy with their livelihoods to feed their families. And certainly they won't be able to afford a laptop or computer. Dr. Tuga has already outlined, the implications of that. Unfortunately, digital literacy will be excluding so many children, particularly those that cannot afford and access. And I acknowledge that most teachers will have found this shift overwhelming also, knowing that they too have their own crosses to bear. The pandemic surely brings a lot of challenges to everyone in many different ways. And hopefully this will lead you to reflect on how powerful you can be in transforming lives, particularly during these difficult times. As teachers and educators, you have three key roles. And I want you to remember three words from my talk. Okay? Firstly, as mentors, to provide emotional support and guidance to your students and your peers, to reach out to them. Somewhere in your schools and communities, there are children who are feeling very anxious and they have no one to talk to because their parents are understandably so busy working. Understanding and kindness will go a long way, as you know. Make the school a nurturing place where they can feel safe at expressing themselves. Celebrate diversity and acknowledge each of them. Let them believe that their dreams are valid, regardless of where they come from, of who they are. Make everyone feel they belong and that they matter. Teach them the values of ambition, compassion, and inclusion. I know that in the Philippines, this mentoring role is very natural to our teachers and because we have a very nurturing culture. My ultimate mentoring tip for you is summed up in this acronym, GROW, or GROW. GROW stands for goals. Ask your students what they are trying to be or what do they want to achieve. R stands for realities. Ask them what their strengths and weaknesses are. O stands for opportunities or options. So what might be their options to navigate through their problems? And finally, W. W stands for way forward. What will they do? So be a great listener to empower them for their own growth. The second word that I want you to remember is empowerment. Speaking of empowerment, your important role as teachers is as enablers. Teach students useful and practical concepts and skills. And I think that was already highlighted by Sir Chito and Ma'am Briones. Teach them how to think critically. Teach them how to solve problems and make decisions. Teach them agility. I recently coined the word COVID agility. Teach them COVID agility amidst changing conditions. Teach them to communicate. I am a fan of action learning. In my capacity building practice, I think that the most effective way to learn is by doing. So what that means to have a practical curriculum, teach them the life skills and instill the value of lifelong learning. Turn your pedagogies into something that would be valuable for them, something they can use at home and in their communities. Use creative teaching methodologies that will engage them. Build on their strengths and let them learn from their mistakes. So as teachers and educators, let's always ask ourselves, how is this useful to students? Insist on understanding and application rather than memorization. Finally, teachers are leaders who can empower students and make them believe that they will be great someday. So tell and show them the right values to be great citizens. Walk the talk. If you want them to be punctual, don't be late. If you want them to be organized, then don't be disorganized. Show them respect if you want them to be respectful. Your students can only be as good as what you're showing them. So as teachers, be the person you needed when you were younger. Give them a sense of hope and confidence that one day they will look at this pandemic and they will celebrate the value of grit and resilience amidst this complexity. Help them find the silver lining amidst the clouds that is surrounding all of us right now. So let me conclude with some of my favorite lines about the power of education. My namesake Nelson Mandela once said, "Education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world." Indeed, the whole purpose of education is to turn mirrors into windows. When you gaze at the mirror, the only things you can see are your reflection and a limited area around you. However, when you look at the window can be almost endless. So folks, I'd like you to repeat after me, even quietly, with your hand in your heart. I am a teacher. I am a mentor. I am an enabler. And I am a leader. Thank you for listening to me. And I hope that you all enjoyed my story. You truly are one of the greatest heroes of all time, because heroes will not be heroes without teachers, who are the mentors, the enablers, and the leaders who taught them the right values and disposition. Will leave you with my mom's favorite line again. Amidst the darkness, you think you're being buried, but you're actually being planted. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you very much, Sir Nelson, for your very inspiring message to us. Indeed, we are very glad that a Filipino like you is really doing very great in Queensland University of Technology as the Project Director of International Projects Unit of Queensland University of Technology. And we had the privilege of visiting your university as part of the CLADE Fellowship in 2014. In fact, I see my companions in that team present in this conference right now, like Ma'am Joji, Sir Alan Canonigo, Sir Alan de Guzman, Ma'am Mary Ann Serrano, Ma'am Tits Pedrajas. And of course, you would not want to miss this opportunity to meet you on this very special day, which is your birthday. So dear participants, can noted on cue, if I say 1, 2, 3,
go, we say happy birthday. Please open your microphones this time. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy
Happy
birthday!
birthday, Sir
Nelson.
Nelson.
Happy
Happy
birthday.
birthday.
Happy birthday.
More power to you. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Looking at our chat box, I don't see any question, in fact, but instead, I see a lot of very beautiful comments, how inspired they are of your story. Indeed, I believe that poverty should never be a hindrance to achieving what you want to aim for in life. And I'm really very impressed that you have never forgotten your roots as a Filipino. Padayon, Sir Nelson, and we will remember the 3 words that you said: mentorship, empowerment, and being leaders, so that our learners will be able to really grow. On that note, since there is no question, only comments and happy birthday greetings, I will now return the control to our program hosts, Ma'am Mercy and Sir Dom. Happy birthday, Sir Nelson. God bless you and stay safe.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Huda Magtanyo. And truly a very inspiring story, Sir Nelson. We will now move on to the presentation of the Certificate of Recognition to Sir Nelson. And the certificate reads, Metrobank Foundation Network of Outstanding Teachers and Educators Incorporated Certificate of Recognition is presented to Nelson Sanansang, Director, International Projects Unit, Queensland University of Technology, for delivering a relevant and insightful plenary talk entitled Solidarity and Diversity, Navigating Complexities and Ambiguities in the Changing World, during the 3rd International Noted Conference with the theme Equity, Solidarity, and Engagement, Purposive Education in Times of Change, given this 8th day of October 2021. Signed, Dr. Ernilea Picao, Vice President of Noted, and Dr. Josephine M. Calamlam, President, Noted. Thank you very much once again, and congratulations, Sir Nelson. A big, big hand for our last plenary speaker.
All right, congratulations, Sir Nelson, and happy birthday. We miss you. When we met you in Australia, we really had a wonderful time. So yeah, thank you very much for that, and happy birthday again, and congratulations. All right, so we have come to almost the end of our morning session, partner. We had a very fruitful, it was a packed morning, but we really gained a lot. We may have some slight glitches on our technicalities, but that was actually, what do you call this one? That was, how do you say that, partner? That was being replaced, and we forget about the glitches with all the wonderful things that we have been hearing from our speakers, and of course to our participants.
Speakers.
Right, our outstanding speakers, and of course our participants who are eager not to really have this conference. So we are thankful to all our speakers, to all those who have parts in this morning's program. And our afternoon session will be the time for our poster presentation. Isn't that exciting, Dom?
Yeah, very exciting. They can visit the virtual gallery this afternoon at 1 o'clock or a little past 1 maybe.
Right, and speaking of, we will be having themes. Now we will be having, we will be staying on the themes that we have established. So speaking of themes, Dom, for the 2 days, our themes revolve around equity and volatility, converting changes to opportunities accessible to all, solidarity and diversity, navigating complexities and ambiguities in the changing world, and engagement and resilience, anticipating the unpredictability of the times.
Right, Dr. Mercy. And for today, our theme is centered on engagement and resilience, anticipating the unpredictability of times, which is further broken down into sub-themes: economics and management of education, education and socioeconomic development and literacy, poverty and sustainability.
Yeah, these sub-themes, Dom, are what we will be looking forward in our breakout sessions during our poster presentation between 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I am sure we are eager to have intellectual exchanges in the afternoon.
Yeah. With that, ladies and gentlemen, the day is full of vibrance and exuberance from our outstanding speakers down to our very eager participants. We end this morning session with a wish for everyone to have a pleasant afternoon and see you virtually this afternoon.
Mabuhay!
Mabuhay!
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you after lunch.
So our poster presentation will begin at 1 o'clock. Please be reminded. See you in the afternoon.
Hello. I have 3 questions posted, but not one was answered on the chat box.
Sige.
Only one was answered, but I got 2 more.
The questions might be seen by our speakers later, so we just keep track of those questions. I trust that the speakers will see them. Probably after the break.
Oh, but I'm going to sleep now.
Oh.
10 o'clock. I have a work tomorrow. I'm now in my PJ, sorry.
We have a recording. Anyway, probably the team, the technical team can take note of the questions and the answers, ma'am, and we will send you the responses when they come. Yeah, we have a recording of that.
Okay. I'm not sure I'll be coming back tomorrow because this is a work day for us. Yeah, that's the thing.
Ma'am Georgie, is there a way that we can send her the responses when the response comes? They have their email probably. We can just take note.
But actually, my question it isn't for me.
All the proceedings.
It's more like of like
okay. But I guess to whom do you address your question?
The first question was for Dr. Ferlin. She was able to answer. I have one for Dr. Bird, and I have another for Mr. Nelson. And the last two were responded to. So I'm not very sure if you send it to me by email. I will only benefit to my own question.
Sir Nelson, I think answered Ma'am Ruth. He gave an answer here, Ma'am Ruth. I think that leadership, mentorship, and empowerment mindsets should be part of teachers' capability development framework. May sagot siya na dito.
May I go to the chat box?
Sakay Ma'am Ruth, sumagot si Sir Nelson.
Si Dr. Forlin also answered the question live.
Yung link, ma'am, no?
Yes. She has given the link not only for Ma'am Ruth, but for everyone, all of the teachers. No, she's sharing the link. This is free access resource, no reference.
That was emphasized.
Sir Tuga.
I see here, well, a long statement, but I don't see a question to be answered. I think it's just a reaction. But this, I think, I already have sent this to Dr. Bert in his, and I guess he already acknowledged receipt of this reaction. Thank you for the question. Unfortunately, I can provide a detailed response now, but I believe there is no need. Okay. So I guess Dr. Bert will be getting in touch with you. Ayan, sumagot naman siya. He answered your question. So I'm looking at the chat box without my glasses. So bear with me. All right. Okay, there. So if you will look at the chat box, Ma'am Ruth, you will see there the response of Dr. Bert.
Where is
Yeah.
it? I get like there's glitch coming like
Okay.
in and out, so that's why I'm getting lost too.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess all your all your concerns have been addressed in the chat box. And
Okay.
the participants, if they visit the chat box, they will also get to know the responses. So this is actually for all the participants to see when you post
Okay.
it in the chat box. Okay.
But then when you shut down the system, the chat box will also be erased, isn't it? We cannot have a recording of
Oh,
that.
yes. The technical committee is recording the proceedings, including what we see in the chat box.
Okay.
That's part of
Perfect.
the.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Okay.
Take care. Hi.
But the
You're
rest of
sleeping
us,
now.
please stay on. No? We have a exciting.
I can't. I'll be leaving at 4 o'clock in the morning tomorrow.
Good time is it now, Beth?
Now,
Thank you for your questions.
sorry, ma'am. Yeah, I'm good.
What
I'm
time
good.
is it?
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night. Enjoy your sleep.